Just watch the first 20 seconds of this build. We're in a normal loss sector just to test out the damage we deal. Our melee kills here in just 2 hits against the boss. After 2 hits, we also always trigger an ignition, and the scorch from this spreads to nearby enemies. We also always get our melee back, and we're only using half of its full potential. I tested Izanagi's burden to compare damage, and our melee is dealing more than a full honed edge ×4 shot. Yo, what's going on guys? It's G Miners here, and today we have one of the most broken Titan builds, and honestly just all around broken builds in Destiny 2 right now. We are obviously using consecration here, and even without using the full combo, everything gets 1 hit. Some of the mods that we have on are also letting us infinitely chain this melee, so you can just spam the first half of it endlessly, and all you need for this to work is 1 elemental well. We are also going to be able to constantly heal with the build. Restoration ×1 still applies 50 HP a second, which is nuts, and it's only 30 less than that of restoration ×2, and as I mentioned, we can infinitely chain this healing so that it never runs out. The mid game for this build is actually really strong too. After all, we are still going to have our base throwing hammer, which is going to come in clutch for a very specific reason that I'll be going over later in the video, but having this means we can also use it for ad clear and benefit from the cure it provides. The last major benefit that we also are getting is that our base melee punches are also going to count as a charged melee ability. So with mods like Melee Wellmaker, this is going to be able to spawn in solar elemental wells. This is due to the fact that the base melees with Roaring Flames apply scorch stacks. Pretty sure this is a glitch. It might get patched in the future, but for now we can use it. Before I go into the subclass layout, if you guys do find this video useful, don't forget to drop a like and sub down below. It's free, it helps me out a ton, and you can always change your mind later. Starting off with our super, we're going to be rocking Hammer of Soul. Honestly, you probably won't use this much, but if you do, it tends to be the best for ad clear and damage at further ranges. After this, as I mentioned, we are going to be on Throwing Hammer. Both this and Hammer Strike do have the same cooldown time, and Hammer is going to synergize super nicely with one of our mods for the build, as it's going to set everything up for us. This also does have the cure effect and is going to allow us to gain stacks of increased damage for Roaring Flames, and even though we are using Consecration as the main melee ability, since we do have 100% uptime on our charge melee, we will still always have access to the Throwing Hammer. Lastly, I am running healing grenades. With constant healing, this is going to allow us to tank way more damage over time. At base, we're going to get 50 HP per second for 4 seconds, but we are going to be extending this duration constantly as we get melee kills with one of the fragments in the build as well. So as long as you are going to town, we're going to get this increased healing. For our first aspect, we have on Roaring Flames. Very simply, as we get ability kills or even ignition final blows, we're going to be gaining stacks that increase our ability damage. This is going to have 3 total stacks, and they do last for 20 seconds, so you have a ton of time to reset this timer. At 1 stack, we get 20% increased ability damage. At 2 stacks, this is a 44% increase. And then finally, we get 73% at 3 stacks. A little while back, Roaring Flames was also buffed, so now while this is procced, just using the base melee ability, we're going to be dealing solar damage and also apply 30 Scorch stacks. And once again, we are going to be able to generate elemental wells with Melee Wellmaker just off of our base melee with Roaring Flames, so this helps a ton if we ever lose our hammer or accidentally consume our full Consecration melee ability. And then after this is going to be Consecration itself. For anyone who doesn't know what this is, it's going to override our charged melee ability. For this to proc, all we need to do is slide, and then you will see the option to activate Consecration. Now this works in 2 waves. First is going to be the uppercut ability that scorches targets. This is very similar to using a waveframe grenade launcher, and it consumes half of our melee charge. And then the second is the slam. This is going to slam down and send out another larger wave, which ignites anything that was scorched. We are going to have 4 fragments with this build. First up, we are using Ember of Empyrean. This is going to allow us to extend the duration of restoration effects that our grenade provides us with. Regular Scorch melee kills should do this, but Throwing Hammer and Consecration definitely extend this timer. So pop Healing Nade once and you're good to go as long as you keep getting kills. Ember of Ashes is going to increase the scorch stacks we apply to enemies by 50%. Now, consecration by default is going to apply 40 scorch stacks. Since 100 stacks trigger an ignition, this would then take 3 uppercuts to trigger one. With Ember of Ashes, this now goes up to 60 stacks, so we easily trigger an ignition in just 2 uppercuts now. This is a massive improvement to the build, so make sure you have this on at all times, and then this is also going to synergize with our next fragment. Ember of Char is going to allow ignitions to spread scorch stacks to nearby enemies. Assuming something doesn't die from the ignition, this will now always spread 40 scorch stacks by default. And then once again, this gets a 50% boost from Ember of Ashes, so we now are spreading 60 stacks. This means if we ignite red bars nearby bosses, we're going to be spreading 60 stacks from Ember of Char and then apply another 60 stacks from Consecration. So this quickly can allow us to chain back-to-back ignitions under the right circumstances, and it does also allow for natural chain ignitions to happen where one enemy ignites another, which ignites even more, and so on. And then lastly, we do have Ember of Eruption. Very simply, this just increases the area of effect or AoE of ignitions, so there is a higher chance that these chains go off and reach further distances. The best exotics to use for this build are going to be Synthoceps if you want something slightly more casual for less damage. This is going to increase melee damage by 200% as long as you are surrounded by 3 or more enemies for 8 seconds. Or you could run Worm God's Caress. This is what I've been personally using. The only hard part is that the bonus damage you get stacks up to 5 times, so you need to manage your stacks, and then you only have 5 seconds to reproc this damage. However, this is a 650% increase in damage, and this is going to scale with ignitions. So a base ignition, which deals 36,000 damage, now scales up to around 240,000. Not sure who decided this would be balanced, but it's broken, so we're going to abuse the hell out of it. Along with an exotic to increase your damage, you are also going to need the right mods, otherwise the build will just straight up not work. First up, I am running Melee Wellmaker. This spawns in elemental wells when getting kills with a charged melee ability, and again, as I mentioned, for some reason, having Roaring Flames and a base melee counts as a charged melee, so we can also generate these with that. And then after this, I am running Elemental Charge. This makes us charge with light by grabbing elemental wells. On top of this, I am running Supercharged. This allows me to go from Charge with Light times 2 as a max, all the way up to Charge with Light times 4. And we are going to be using these charges a bunch, so we want to be able to store a ton of them up. I also have on stacks. Normally, Elemental Charge gives us 2 stacks of Charge with Light per pickup. So now with stacks on stacks, grabbing a single Elemental Well maxes us out immediately at 4 stacks. The final mod, which makes this full build come together, is going to be Heavy-Handed. This consumes only 1 stack of Charge with Light and gives back 50% of our melee ability when using our melee. This is why we only use the uppercut, because we can infinitely spam it as it only uses half of our melee charge. We use half the melee and then we get half instantly back. We deal pretty much the exact same amount of damage and proc ignitions way more frequently. I did mention that the Throwing Hammer comes in clutch. To use this build, you first want to get charged by getting a Throwing Hammer kill. This is going to give our full melee back because we're just going to pick it back up, and it's going to get us to Charge with Light times 4. So with a single kill, the full build is ready to go with a 0 downtime. From here, you literally just spam uppercuts, proc ignitions, and grab elemental wells that you spawn in. Having 4 charges per pickup is super nice because it means you can do this melee 4 times before you need to grab another elemental well. Hands down, one of the best builds for just dominating in end game content. The survivability, ad clear, and damage go pretty much unmatched with this build if you can pull it off. So as you saw in the title, I think it's pretty fair to call it one of the best builds in the game. I stream over on Twitch almost every night. We are in the process of learning speedruns for Vow of the Disciple, so come say hi, hang out, and enjoy the streams over there, and make sure you join the Discord if you guys want to snag the dim link for the build. Let me know your thoughts on the build in the comments below, along with some other builds you'd like to see me try out this season. As always, have a good one, guys. Peace.